Good afternoon, everybody. My name is McLaughlin, and I'm here to talk to you about the InterSystems Secure Development Framework, also known as our Secure Software Development Lifecycle. It's a little bit different, I think, topic than what you've seen here at the rest of Global Summit. It's not really focused on the technology, but really the people and the process. And I really want to talk to you today about how we do handle security at InterSystems and how we can better partner with your security programs. So hopefully that's what you're here to understand and to talk to me about. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit about myself. I'm new to InterSystems. I've been here about a year and a half. Prior to that, I started my career as a software developer. So I was a software engineer for probably about 5 years. Then I moved into security consulting, really from a networking standpoint. I was with Cisco for many years. So I have a systems approach to things. And that not only is for software development, but also how we put together databases and architectures. So with that, I did security consulting for Cisco, penetration testing, and then I got into their vulnerability management. And after that, I really built a couple security programs, really focused on compliance and how could we make sure that the products, always focused on products, are secure and deliver what they say they should in a secure manner. Just some of the other things I've done in my years, but it's really wide background, and I think the things I bring to InterSystems and to our customers is that that systems approach to security and the holistic architecture. So what we're going to talk about again today is starting with kind of an overview of software security. What are the threats that we're facing as an industry? I think these will resonate with you. If there's other things that you think that I'm missing or want to interject, please do at any time. I know it's difficult with the mic, but I'll repeat anything you guys say. So I really want to make this as interactive as possible. Second, really talk about our secure development framework, what it looks like, how we're analyzing threats and addressing those within InterSystems in our compliance programs. And then what are the things that we provide to support that partnership with our customers. I want to make sure that we're transparent on our security practices so that any compliance that you have or commitments to your customers, we make sure that we work together with that. Benefits, of course, is understanding our security strategy a little bit better, providing more transparency on that. Understand how our security strategy is not something that I thought up, in isolation. It's really based off current threats and making sure that you guys have the references that you need to ensure that the integrity of our software as we deliver it and the whole software ecosystem. So starting with the state of software security, I don't think this comes as any surprise to anyone. What's kind of surprising to me, though, is that attacks have been increasing about 10% year over year. We're now seeing about 5.3 trillion intrusion attempts across systems. One of the things that is kind of perplexing to me on this is we know that the device-to-device communication has really increased exponentially, but yet the attacks increase pretty much linearly. Also, what we saw, it's not in here, is in 2021, since this is aggregate, the second half of 2021, for whatever reason, there was a sharp decline in the number of attacks on the internet. We really don't know why, but we will see whether or not that picks back up for 2022. The data is still out on that. So with that, we know that attacks are increasing, great. Who's getting targeted, right? And we see the financial and healthcare are two of the top industry. Almost 0.25% of the attacks are against those industries. Why do you guys think that might be? Any ideas?
They can't afford to go down.
They can't afford to go down?
Yeah.
So for ransomware,
That sort of thing, yeah.
denial of service. Yeah, and some of the things that when I look at this, I try to analyze what's different between the top attacks and the bottom. And we know attackers are opportunistic. They want the biggest bang for their buck. It's a business. ransomware. So as we look in financial and business professional, healthcare, these are the ones where data is really what's driving their business. So when I look at risk, I say, okay, data, these guys are really data intensive, can't afford to go down. They're going to be paying the ransom. Utilities, I mean.
The data is valuable to attackers, social security numbers and medical data and stuff that you can impersonate people with, that sort of thing.
That's very important too. Yeah, if you're not familiar with the way ransomware usually works, it's not just encrypting your data. Usually it's a two-prong attack. They'll do the data exfiltration, they'll take that data, and then they'll try to either sell it on the black market, they'll try to blackmail you to make sure that you not only pay to get it back, but pay that to keep them from releasing it, and oftentimes they release it anyway. So, we kind of get an idea, and this all of a sudden says, okay, great, we're a database company, InterSystems is a database company. I'm concerned about the data and protecting that data. So what's the kind of the techniques and who's attacking me, right? So we started saying ransomware. So this is where I kind of say we have three classifications, really, of attackers. We have script kiddies, which are people who are maybe less sophisticated, running scanners, tools that they download off the internet. And on the other side, we have the nation-state actors. And these are the types of attacks that we see being conducted. But what we really see is some general trends about these different attackers. Many threat actors are using the same tools. These are open source tools or things that are pirated commercial tools. And many of the techniques will start as nation-state actors and then go down to more the script kiddie or the less sophisticated. A prime example of this is about 5 years ago. I don't know if you guys are aware of the shadow brokers attack. There was a nation-state who their tools were released on the internet. And because of that, all of a sudden we saw Petya, and WannaCry, those viruses. Those were actually based off of the data from that nation state. And those were brought down into the script kiddies. But we're also seeing the techniques kind of change, and that tools and techniques that are designed to complement the IT supply chain are really going from the nation-state actors, where we had software dormant for many years, to being readily available on the internet. And that's one of the things I really want to focus on today, is that supply chain. So how is it that InterSystems is developing that and delivering the software? And then a lot of you are resellers, and how are you delivering that to your customers? So with that, what types of, now that we know that there's attacks, how are they getting in? We see a lot of exploits, still primarily focused on buffer overflows, cross-site scripting, those types of things, as well as the supply chain attacks. So when I start looking at how InterSystems is going to defend on these, this represents over half the attacks. And everything on this side you really see is more operational. We have prior compromise, phishing, stolen credentials, and other usually misconfigurations. But almost half of these are things where InterSystems can directly affect. So exploits is where I focus on our security architecture. And then the supply chain is where we really talk about the operational aspects and how we can make sure that we're delivering software in a secure manner. And this is just kind of, the stat that I have here is really what I wanted to focus on, is the supply chain was, in 2021, was actually responsible for 62% of the compromise. So when I start thinking about security at InterSystems, I want to make sure that InterSystems, our entire pipeline, is secure from the time that from the development to the time that you guys install it in your systems. We have some assurance that there's the integrity of that software. And we'll see, denial of service, relatively small, because we were talking earlier, that's probably not very profitable. Remote file access, getting that data, definitely is one of the most popular ways of system intrusion. Now, when I talk about supply chain attacks, this means a lot of different things, and it's really the focus of what I want to talk about today. What is it that we're talking about? This really came about in, I think, to light about December of 2020. Do you guys remember SolarWinds? Okay. Yeah, so SolarWinds was IT management software. It was deployed in a lot of environments, IT environments, maybe some of yours. The updater, actually the software was compromised and then distributed through their update, and then an attacker came and was able to access many different customers through that. The Nox player, the rest of these are probably a little bit less known, but I wanted to bring them up to let you know that these are still ongoing attacks and are evolving. So the Nox player was an Android emulator. And in February 2021, again, it was a man-in-the-middle attack for the updater. The updater installed malware. CodeCov. This was actually a software which they had a piece of an uploader, which would take your software and upload it to see the code coverage for test suites, as well as performance data. That actually had malware and was used to steal credentials and actually exfiltrate, copy any kind of secrets in that code. And that went undetected for several months. The last two are really more interesting. Is anyone familiar with the KCA? The SMP? Yeah. So it was actually classified as a single biggest ransomware that we know to date. What we had there was a piece of software for remote access. It was used by managed service providers, MSPs. And those MSPs used it to get health and well-being information about all their clients. Once that was compromised, the attackers then deployed ransomware on all the vendors that were using that MSP, that managed service provider, resulting in, as I said, one of the largest ransomwares that we've seen to date. The Python package index, this one's a little bit different in that a lot of people are using Python. The attackers went in and put malware within the Python package index library. It was then downloaded by other people using Python about 41,000 times. And then, of course, they use that to exfiltrate a variety of confidential information. So how do we defend this, right? These are all things which are outside of our control. I'm trusting SolarWinds to do things, certain processes in place to secure that data. I expect when I download a Python package, there's some kind of integrity there, right? So we do have a number of processes and best practices in place, and that's what we'll talk about next. But really, there's two things here. First is have a well-defined software development lifecycle, and I'm glad that Paul showed up. If you want to know anything about our software development lifecycle, he's responsible for making sure that he drives the maturity of our lifecycle, our software development lifecycle. And then on top of that, we have our secure software development framework, which really works hand in hand with the software development lifecycle to make sure that we have security requirements and different practices, and we manage those practices. So what is a software development framework or secure SDLC? There's 4 practice areas. Really, we have to prepare the organization. We protect the software. We produce well-secured software and architecture. And then the incident response and respond to those vulnerabilities. We have a well-defined vulnerability management program. So I'm getting down to, I guess, the InterSystems side of that. Any questions or comments about kind of what you guys are seeing about the threat landscape? Any things top of mind? Okay. So starting with the vision, the keynote that we had, I think, yesterday, Terry talked about you start with the vision. So the InterSystems Product Security and Architecture Organization really is here to promote product security practices that enables InterSystems to develop, maintain, and evolve consistent software methodology that meets industry standards and its customer expectations. And this really results in protecting both InterSystems and the customers, right? So what's key here is that cooperation and that transparency between the InterSystems and our customers. How do we do that? That execution. First, we must partner with customers to meet your security requirements. We work with the industries to evolve best practices. There's a number of industry consortiums that we are a partner of. Internally, we encourage a pervasive mindset around security that's part of the corporate culture. We make sure that we provide you a secure architecture as well as tools that help develop, deploy, and operate those secure applications. And then internally focused, we really have a consistent set of tools and practices that we use that are aligned with industry best practices. We integrate those so there's a lot of automation with our development methodology to make sure that we continue to deliver features in a timely manner. And then finally, the key is the roles and responsibilities, right? Both internal and external, understanding who's responsible for security, and it's not just a technology problem, but we have those peoples and processes in place also. So going back to the supply chain, what am I talking about with that supply chain? It really starts from the developers all the way down to the delivery of the software to the customers where they actually install it. So we have, the way I look at this is through a kind of a threat model. We have our developers developing the software. They're putting it in a source code management. We have our build systems. That build system is taking it from the source code management system as well as external dependencies. We manage those through a proxy that stores all those dependencies internally. We then have we take those artifacts, we package them together, and then we deliver it to customers. So at each one of these points, we have some practices that we need to focus on are risks associated with developers, such as inadequate security awareness. There could be injection from the outside into our source code management if that's not authenticated. An attacker can compromise our systems, our source code management systems. Again, an injection attack into the build system, insecure code, either coming from an external dependency through something like a dependency confusion attack. So that we have our internal system that could be compromised. After those artifacts are built, they can be modified before they're packaged. So that can happen along these lines. That packaging system could be compromised, or that delivery mechanism, as we saw with the Vox player. And of course, these packages, it's kind of a loop here. Once we build something, it can come back into the pipeline. So in this presentation, the second half of what I'm really talking about is focused on our collaboration with our customers. How are we packaging things securely that gives us assurance throughout the rest of the pipeline, and then what can customers actually do? So a quick overview. This is kind of the practice areas in our secure development framework. We're not going to get into every single one of these, but these are the common things that you'll see in any kind of development organization. Starting from design, conceptualization, we have sponsorship from Terry as well as Scott and our legal team. We track issues, all the table stakes. Our security requirements, we do threat modeling. Implementation, we have standards on that, all of our security testing, and then again, we're kind of talking about the development and response. So if we take that original, each one of those threats, we can then map those to different practice areas and say that, for developer training, inadequate developer training, we have a core training program. Again, a lot of this is focused on that latter half. And what I want to talk about today is really the release, deployment, and response. Any questions about kind of the model there? So what is it that we're actually looking to do, or what is it that we do in order to support our customers, especially in that delivery? So the different areas that I want to talk about is PGP. Are you guys all familiar with PGP? Somewhat. So we're expanding our support of PGP. I'll talk a little bit about that. We currently are changing the way that we sign our kits as well as individual files. I'll give you a little bit of an update of that. We have made modifications. Not everything supports code signing, so how is it that you can actually verify the hashes and ensure that those are correct? We have executive orders as well as other mandates, financials, requiring a software bill of materials. How can you get that, and what is that? And also how we communicate security issues, how you sign up for our security alerts and communicate back to us, as well as references to that. So PGP, we have 2 PGP keys that we typically use. If you're not familiar, I'm sure you're not familiar with these. The first one is releases@intersystems.com. This is used throughout our build process to actually sign the files and ensure that we have the same artifacts as it goes through, and also the artifacts that we give to you. And then we also have a PCert key, and this is used to really collect feedback from customers and the industry to support secure communication with those who don't necessarily have a partnership with us. We don't use that to sign our security alerts because we only provide security alerts in HTML, email, and it gets all messed up with the validation of that. So these keys are available on a variety of key stores today. We have it on PGP, Ubuntu, and Open PGP. What that actually looks like, I have each one of those 3 websites here. I know this is small, but you can search for either the email address or a full hash or the 32-bit key ID. And once you actually do that, it will return back, again, the key ID and the user ID, will be, in this case, release engineering. And a key looks something along this, it's a bunch of ASCII characters. You then can import that through something such as GNU Privacy Guard, GPG, and it will be used for validation or sending us emails. Any questions? Pretty straightforward. So code signing. We continue to release kits on the Windows platform, which are signed by a DigiCert certificate, or a certificate that we get from DigiCert. Next year, we really plan on expanding our code coverage. A lot of feedback that we have is we want more coverage of not just release kits, but maybe ad hocs, including things such as OSX signing, signing the individual executables and DLLs. One of the major problems that we have with vendors, third-party endpoint protection software, is really Iris is being blocked because it's not signed. By signing individual files, we'll bypass that. And then Java libraries signing those. So what this actually looks like here is signatures are validated automatically by Windows once you install the software. However, if you want to manually verify that software is being signed, you can right-click on it. You'll see that under signature details, you'll see it's SHA 256 signature, get the certificate, and if you view the certificate details, you can see it's a DigiCert. As I said, we're going to expand that in this next year. Why don't we host it? We could. The key idea is published there, but if someone were to compromise our website, it's good to have it also somewhere else so that you have it independently verified or an independent source. So that's what we're getting into next, because not all platforms support code signing. So in this case, Windows, we have a DigiCert certificate. Every Windows machine automatically has the DigiCert root CA installed on it. So because our signing certificate is signed by DigiCert and been issued by DigiCert, you know that our certificate's good, or this code was signed and legitimate. But on things such as platforms such as Linux, it doesn't natively support code signing. So that's where we use the PGP key. So once you actually download the software, I'm sure you guys have seen this, there's a couple things here. You go to our software distribution site, and if you go to InterSystems Iris, you'll notice that, here's our download. Typically, we have the MD5 checksum. But what you might not have noticed is that it says InterSystems now offers multiple checksums options, and you can download a checksum file. If we go back to this list, you'll see that's also, fourth from the bottom, an option to download those files. What these look like is there's a JSON file, and you can download that, as well as a signature file. And this is where that PGP really comes in play. So what this file looks like is if you download that JSON file, you'll notice that we have the kit name as well as 5 different hashes. So MD5 is no longer considered secure, even though it's the default. We still deliver the MD5, a RIPE 160, as well as SHA-1, 256, and 512. Now, these are computed during the build pipeline, during the build process, and stored in this file. The question is, how do you know that this hasn't been modified along with the kits? So that's really where the PGP signature comes in. This file is cryptographically signed with the private key. And so you can verify that this file, all the data in this file has not changed. And the way we actually do that is through GNU Privacy Guard. You can say, take that, verify the JSON file with that signature, and it says it's a good signature. So we know that that hash file has not changed since it left our build system. Now, how do we actually do that in practice? Now that we know that that hash file hasn't been modified, what does that tell us? Well, if we take out, for example, the SHA-256 hash from that, so I'm just using a JQ which extracts an element from a JSON, file. And so I have the SHA-256 hash. I then compute the SHA-256 hash of my image, and we can see those are the same. And if you really want to get clever, you can write a 1-line bash script that's, or 3-line. 1 line that's on 3, which says I'm going to extract that out, compare the hashes, and they do match, right? So does that kind of all make sense about how those are computed and stored? So once we know the hashes are, that hash file is good, we can then determine that that file has not changed.
Unless both compromised, right? So if I downloaded your package from some whatever source,
Yep.
and that also supplied with PGP to make sure that they match, but the package itself is compromised.
If the package was compromised, it'd have to be before, during the build system, prior to it getting into our build system, right? So we have other controls. We have endpoint protection. But we do know that that PGP key is stored. We use HashiCorp Vault to actually store that. So only the build systems will have access to that private key to actually check that integrity as it goes through. So it would have to be, the attacker would have to compromise both the source code, some of the source code repository, as well as get access to that key.
So it cannot be injected by the third party.
We have other ways that we're protecting that from the beginning, but yes, from the time that it's on the build system out, we know that it hasn't been modified. Of course, the source code itself, we have static application security testing and all kinds of validation for dynamic and static testing before it gets into this process. Yep. Yes, sir.
Do you know how many customers actually do what you just did, i.e. validating the system pull down? I've never heard of any customers actually doing that. And if it's worth a show of hands, does anybody do that?
2, I know, 3, 4. Oh, so the question was how many customers are actually validating this? And I saw 2 people at least in the room. And I do know a couple more that are not in this room. So, those with a high security concern or in regulated environments will have a checklist to make sure that they validate the software before they install it.
Is that something that we publish anywhere? Because I've never really seen any notes on how to actually do that.
This is something that, so originally what we had was just the MD5 hashes, which the concern came up probably about 3 months ago that MD5 is not considered a secure hashing algorithm anymore. And so this is kind of a new process that's come out in the last 3 months. So I guess this is probably news to you guys also, right? So is this valuable, or is this, what are your thoughts about this particular process?
Oh, no. I mean, we're required by the state to be HITRUST certified.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have a security engineer watch the application engineer go through the process you're talking about. So, yeah.
So for high trust and regulated environments, it's a requirement. So if you do find a security issue, how do we get it back to InterSystems? Of course, the primary source for customers is our WRC. We do have a publication about reporting security vulnerabilities to us. If you don't have a relationship directly with InterSystems, there's 2 options. One is our solutions provider. You go to your solutions provider or send it directly to that pcert alias, pcert@intersystems.com. And again, that supports PGP encrypted email. So if there's any security researchers or other people in the community that don't necessarily have the credentials to go to the WRC, we still want to work with them and make sure that we get that information. Again, events like the Global Summit, make sure that we are establishing those relationships. A lot of you guys know Andreas. He's been here for 20-something odd years, 30 years. And he collects a lot of the security input. He's our security project manager. But there's also Black Hat, DEF CON, things like that at RSA that we will go to. So find us at those places. We just had a security alert go out, as you guys probably know. It was SVR 2022.A. And when do we do this? It's been about 1.5 years since our last security alert actually was published. This one did have almost 30 security fixes in it. And why was there the delay? Well, there was a lot of change in our processes over the last year, and we wanted to make sure that we had a fix available for all releases before we made it publicly announced. That's why if you look at the details, you'll notice that what was unique about this SVR from other ones that you might have had in the past was the fixed software. There was no additional patch. It was all in released kits already, right, or maintenance kits. We have changed a couple things. The security alerts are now sent out through Pega, our CRM system. So if you did not get them and you need them, contact the account team. What we're doing is we're loading them into the CRM system, translating them into all the different languages, and then we use Pega to send them out to all the customers. Best practice with this, it's always better to use a alias instead of individual name, so that if someone's on vacation, whatever, you can manage that distribution. So another thing that we provide to give some assurance in the software supply chain is starting in Iris 2022 for the data platform, we start distributing a software bill of materials. And this really has come out of the Executive Order 14028, which is improving the nation's cybersecurity. The EU also follows the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which requires vendors to do a threat analysis, including third-party software and looking at those. So this is available on our website under intersystems.com/third-party products. It is a PDF file, and it just lists all the licenses and third-party components used in different components of our software. Good reference to have handy is Global Trust. All of this information can be found on, if you go to intersystems.com/GT or Global Trust, you'll notice that a lot of the references are GDPR statement, reporting security vulnerabilities, a description of our software development lifecycle, our secure coding policies are all listed there. And again, this is just kind of an overview. I know I showed this document here. A high-level version of that is actually available on the website also. So with that, I know you guys have probably, I've seen a lot of your faces in different security sessions. Andreas yesterday had the updates in security for the data platforms. If you haven't seen that, there is a recording of it. Tomorrow, Tim Levitt has an OWASP Top 10 and InterSystems application development. And there's also an updates in Security and Health Share Suite tomorrow. Andreas and I are both here to have one-on-one sessions to talk about your security programs and how we can collaborate with you. Paul Golden also is here to talk to you about security development or our software development lifecycle. So definitely reach out to us. My contact information is there. And I'll open up to any questions. Thanks. Yes?
Not really software related, but is InterSystems doing anything to evaluate like security tools to see which ones don't interfere with the program? Because we've gone through a couple that just kind of bring a program to a screeching halt.
Are you talking about like endpoint protection?
Like Taegis, Tripwire, or something that be running on the server, stuff like that.
So yes, yes and no. It's very difficult to test everything, right? So we do have a couple vendors that we test with, particularly the endpoint protection. And I've been working quite closely with them to find out what the best practices are, because anything that's going to interfere with your IOPS, your input-output operations per second, is going to have an impact to a database. Microsoft Defender, for example, on Windows, they do have some configuration settings that they've recommended for their SQL Server, and those also help. Working with Palo Alto, specifically with XDR, to find out how we can optimize that better. But it is a common theme that people will report problems with endpoint protection, and it usually ends up being an issue that I've tried to reach out to the vendors, and they would rather work one-on-one with their customers than with us. So, Did you have a question?
Yeah, is it possible to integrate PGP login to Iris management? Straight possible.
Integrate,
To log into the back end,
log into the back end with
Iris management.
our.
Secure card.
Oh.
Federal government gift cards.
Oh, okay.
There's a 2FA, I think, with the phone or like receive SMS message, but
Yeah.
not up to our standards.
Okay. Yeah, let's have a discussion about your requirements there with Andreas.
By LDAP, but
Mhm.
it requires have a service account
Right.
on an Active Directory. It's also that's yeah. It's so it-
We're switching cards, so that may impact it.
So you guys are looking to use your cards, your security cards with the Iris, the portal,
to log into port.
log into the portal. Yeah,
Username and password.
using,
Now we use username and password.
yeah. So let's have a discussion about what that might look like later on. Any other questions? We have about 3 minutes left. Great. Thank you. I appreciate your attention and your input.